Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our first Brighton's Disruptive Changemakers event. Lots of great words in there. We're going to be talking about words a little bit later on. But I'm glad something in that captured you guys, for you guys to be here tonight. First of all, I want to say my name is Sara Osterholzer. For those of you who don't know, I am one of the co-founders of the Good Business Club. And it's a real pleasure to be here tonight, to be hosting this conversation. And I wanted to give you guys a little bit of context about why we're here tonight and why this conversation is even being had. And for us, that starts about talking to you a little bit about the Good Business Club to set the scene. So the Good Business Club is a community of change makers who are supporting each other to move business for good forward. So first of all, I hear you all cry, what's a change maker? We'll talk about that. So for us, at the Good Business Club, we started looking at businesses to start off with and quickly realized, actually, to serve the community we're trying to serve, it's about the individual. And what we saw, it was about individuals who could see a better future, and they were actually doing something about it to change the world around them, and doing that through business. We set up this community in January of this year, and we've got 135 members already. I wanted to give you a little bit of breakdown of what change makers now look like for us. So we've got everyone who's got from an idea to more established businesses, and you can see the kind of 1 to 5 year is where the majority of our members kind of are. We've got everything and very mirrored in the Brighton community, from solo entrepreneurs to kind of smaller businesses of 1 to 10 staff, and then also small businesses that are up to 50 staff. And a good mix between B2B and B2C. And why that's also important is actually why our community, I think, works so well. And really what we're trying to do is a few things. So one is just to connect members to each other. So when members join, the first thing we do is get a really good sense of who they are and what they need, and then take the pain out of networking, basically. So we connect them to people within the community that can really help them, and we host monthly meetups to get people to actually meet other like-minded business people. We also work with our members to curate support events, basically, and support offers. And what we're actually doing is getting members to support each other by doing that. All we're doing is creating the space to help people find other people who are doing business good and well, and working with each other. And finally, we really want to be amplifying our members' voices, and that's a little bit of what we're doing here today. So all the members in our community are doing some amazing work, and part of it is just growing a community where we can support them and support each other. But the thing that we really want to do, and the vision we see, is that all businesses are actually doing something good, which we'll be talking about a bit more today as well. And for us, it's about showcasing what are people already doing in this space, and how can we inspire other people to look at their own business models and see how they can actually be doing something better in the way they're doing business as well. Which kind of brings us back to what is a business for good. So it's a conversation that we have more or less daily, one-to-one with people, and we think it's really critical to actually open up this conversation and to basically inspire other businesses to get a better sense of what it means. And personally, I think there's a lot of theory and frameworks that comes around this as well, and actually the practical element of what does it even mean day to day when you're running these businesses, what does that even look like? So that's what we're doing here today. I've invited, so these are 5 members of the Good Business Club who have joined and are contributing and getting something from the community. We've picked people who are running very different type of businesses, and we thought we'd ask them to share with us what that actually looks like. All right, are you guys excited? Are you ready for this conversation? Great, thank you. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce, we've got Fox Gear from Humanitive and Founders for Good. We've got Ruth Anslow from HISBE. We've got Atif Choudhury from DNA and Zaytoun. Reeves from Joyful Web and Belongcon, and Michael Ryan from Now Charity Group. Warm welcome, please. Thank you. Amazing, you've got a mic. So we've got a mic to share between 5 people, so bear with us as well as we move conversation around. Okay, so I know you all very well. Thank you, first of all, also for being here and sharing an insight into what it means day to day for you guys to be running your businesses. I'd love to give people in the room here who maybe don't know who you are, don't know what your businesses are, a little insight into, yes, how you're doing things slightly differently. So the first question I wanted to offer is, how is your business in service for good? And Ruth, I might start with you if that's all right.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ruth Anslow. I'm a co-founder of HISBE Food with my sister and my friend Jack. And we're motivated to do what we do because there needs to be a great shift in the way we buy and consume food to make the food industry and the food system future-proof, which it's not at the moment, and to make it sustainable. So in the interests of a sustainable food future, we decided to reinvent the way supermarkets do business. We figured if we could set up and successfully run a supermarket on a social enterprise model, we could be a template for others to follow. And if enough people did that, then the food industry would be transformed. So we set up HISBE Food as a social enterprise, a classic social enterprise. Our intention being to put our purpose motives at the heart of what we do. And create a set of values that would always live within the business. So that's me.
Clear, thank you.
I'll go next. So I'm Fox. I'm primarily representing our company Humanitive today. What we find is that there's a lot of founders and people who run companies who are really trying to do good, but they get stuck with the systems and software and technology that they need to actually do it. A lot of the people who come to us, they've got an idea, but they don't know what they do next. So we come in and work out what is their impact, what are they actually trying to do, and build them the tools so that they can actually do it, so we can make that effect really far-reaching and not have them held up on things, whether that's mental health or neurodiverse issues. So we try to make sure that we're not just writing good code, but we're coding for good. And that really helps us. Since sort of early 2000s, over 4 billion's been lost on projects that just kind of fell in the can, got wasted. So where we really excel is trying to rapidly evolve an idea and clarify it and de-risk it, so that they're not building what they could build, they're building what they should build. So that's important. And then the second piece was Founders of Good, which is a podcast I'm just launching. I've got 40 people. Sara's the first. Trying to share the stories of the actual founders and the commonalities between them. So feel free to check that out as well. But it's all about making people the best version of themselves and the businesses to the best version of the business. So.
Great, thank you, Fox.
So how do we do good? So I'm really fortunate to be part of 2 organisations that get to do a lot of good. One is an olive oil company in Palestine, which some of you might have seen. It looks like this. And it's a great story. It does a lot of good. If I elaborate, there's a tough situation out there. It's real, and it's sad and it's deeply avoidable. It does a lot of good by being able to trade and support families that have been trading and selling olive oil in their own families and their livelihoods for over 3,000 years. So it connects people to that good. It connects people to the taste of really good olive oil, but it also connects to the justice and the support of livelihoods of families that deserve better. So we do that. I found my voice in the most, probably one of the most harrowing places I could ever be in, and I discovered that I could do good. That I could be part of something that would really connect and change. I never thought I would. So, and so I came back and got very involved and passionate about setting that up, and it became the world's first fair trade olive oil, and etc. And in that voice, I think that I was really interested in looking at what I wanted as a young person. Not that I am anymore, but what I wanted then. And I struggled as a neurodivergent learner who really didn't always have the confidence to connect to things, and also really felt that my ideas were a bit wacky, but eventually one of them really worked. So I started an organisation with some really good friends and my wife who's over there, and we started an organisation called Diversity and Ability. And DNA, as it's often known, is about providing assistive technology and support for disabled and neurodivergent learners, to make sure that technology can be part of their lives. It works in supporting learners who are facing long-term homelessness. It does a lot of good in that space with crisis. We also work with universities as well, and it's now grown, challenging the disability employment gap, which is winning lots of attention for, which is great. But the biggest thing is that we've now grown just from that one idea 10 years ago to supporting over 17,000 people in the UK. So that's a big, reasonable chunk of good that I like to feel we're connecting to. But we're learning every day, you know, and the good is reciprocal as well. So I hope that lands.
That's perfect introduction. Thank you.
My name's Alice Reeves, and I am one of the co-founders of The Joyful Web, and we are a digital growth agency that supports good businesses. And The Joyful Web was born out of both myself and my business partner Sophie worked for very traditional marketing agencies, and there was an awful lot about the way that marketing agencies operate that we didn't like, that didn't sit that well with us. And a big part of it was that the type of companies that can afford to work with big marketing agencies are the type of companies that have big marketing budgets. So we found ourselves almost exclusively working with companies like from the finance sector, pharma sector, fast fashion, the type of companies that didn't really sit well with our values. So we set the Joyful Web up as a way of providing our services to companies that are change makers, are disruptive, are interested in more than just selling a product or a service. They're companies that want to make a positive impact in the world through their products and services, through their underlying purpose and mission. And we only work with companies who are aligned to those values and who we genuinely believe in, because we believe that to market a company effectively and to really work properly with a company as a marketer, you have to be aligned in your values. So that's where the Joyful Web came from, and also the name. There wasn't really much joy in what we were doing, and so we thought, well, we'll set up a company that is based on joy, where we enjoy what we're doing and we get excited by what we're up to, and we support our clients to get excited by what we're up to as well. So Sara also mentioned BelongCon, which again was a community initiative that started as a passion project, which brings people together like this to hear from people where they found that sense of belonging and purpose in the world. And that's been a real catalyst for some really important conversations starting in the local community. So that's me.
Thank you, Alice.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm the CEO of the Now Charity Group. We are the largest independent reuse charity in the South East, providing essential household items and community experiences to people in need. Why do we do good? Well, every year 10 million household items in the UK enter landfill, and over 50% of those can either be repaired and redistributed to people in need. Combined with that, we have a serious issue with furniture poverty in the UK. And over 14 million people either live on the poverty line or below the poverty line, meaning at any given time they can only afford to purchase one essential household item during that period, which is a real issue if you're moving into a new property for the first time and you need to furnish that, and many families and children across the country are without a bed to sleep on at night. So we seek to combine the environmental benefits and the poverty-based benefits to impact on the circular economy and the social economy across Sussex.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Michael. I'm hoping that gives you guys a real sense of just how different all these businesses are, different stages, supporting different people, very different models. So what we're going to do next is really jump into a few questions. Just to let you guys know, there will be space to open up to the audience for questions as well, so do keep that as you're kind of listening. So the first question I've got is one that we've heard also from people when they signed up, which I think is the question we get asked all the time. Social impact, financial sustainability. How do you make that balance for your business? Have you find yourself backed into corners because of it? We'd love to hear your actual reality around that. Michael, do you want to start?
No, thanks very much. So the challenge that I find, particularly in the sector that I work in, is that so many people still view social impact and profit at opposite ends of the psychological spectrum, and there is a harmony that can be achieved there. And almost that there's this strategical paradox that social impact decisions are made with the heart and financial decisions are made with the head. And there's 2 points that I'd like to touch on, particularly relating to this question. And the first one is that, for me, any successful business, whether it's a charity or a private-based company, has to have purpose and social impact sitting at its core. Because as Simon Sinek said, as part of the Golden Circle talk that he gave many years ago now, people aren't buying what you do, they are buying why you do that. And that is as prevalent now as it's ever been. And it's particularly evidenced in millennials, and there's a clear trend of purpose purchasing and millennials turning away from unethical brands, companies that have a large carbon footprint, and they are prepared to pay more on the basis of being an ethical purchase. So that's kind of one harmony that can live there. The second point that I would make is that there's a distinct difference between being purpose-driven as a business and being financially responsible. Now, particularly in our line of work, we understand the impacts of employment, both on families and the local economy. And as a business, first and foremost, you need to survive. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad business, it doesn't necessarily mean you're purpose-driven. It means that you're being financially responsible. And even as a charity or as a social impact-orientated business, tough decisions will need to be made. And if you don't make those tough decisions, the knock-on effect of the existence of your business, unemployment, core services being delivered would have a far greater negative social impact than if you are operating on a financially responsible standing. It's very, very difficult to be 100% social impactful all of the time. Otherwise, we would sling open the doors of our retail sites, everybody would walk in, take the furniture away for free. It's an economically destructive model, and vice versa. You could never be 100% profit-driven because it would be difficult to justify any form of social purpose within that. So that's where I stand with it. It's very much about being ethically minded, and people understanding the why of your business, whatever your structure may be, and being financially responsible, not profit-driven.
That's really clear. Thank you, Michael. Alice, I see you nodding your head a lot. Do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much I can add, really. I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think I have had experience of working for organisations before I started my own business where there really wasn't any motivation other than impacting the bottom line. And it was all about how you can cut corners and how you can save money and what's the cheaper option and, who do we put on this project who's cheaper so we can make sure they're more profitable. And that really wasn't, when you're thinking kind of wider about the impact on a team, a key thing about a successful business is building a team. And you mentioned Generation Z about their kind of purchasing power. Also, when it comes to them looking for jobs, they don't want to work for organizations that aren't aligned to their values. They want to work for companies who they feel they can come into work every day and really feel like they're making a difference, or at least not working for someone that is having a detrimental impact. So I think that, as well as kind of you operating as a business and being attractive to consumers and your potential customers, you also have to think about having that purpose and value as a way to be attractive to people that you want to come and work for you. And that's been a big thing for us. And, I'm still absolutely blown away that there are people, that, we're growing our team, that there are people that want to come in and work for us, not because we can offer the most competitive salary or employee package, but because they genuinely believe in what we do and they want to work for a company that has our values. So that would be what I would add.
Thank you. I wonder if one of the other speakers also want to share maybe an example. I'm sure everyone's here going, okay, that makes sense, but was there actually an example that once you've had to look at that and really look at how you're going to make that work? I don't know if Ruth's nodding her head.
Running a shop, it's like a beast of its own. Once the doors are open, you've got the customers, you've got the products, you've got this kind of living thing. And if it's like driving a bus, I don't know where all these analogies are coming from. Say I'm driving a bus, and on the bus there's profit and purpose and all our values. Most of the time, purpose is driving the bus. But sometimes profit has to drive the bus. For example, last Christmas was crap for retail. Everyone was worried about Brexit and holding on to their money and having a skint Christmas. And when we don't get the customers in the door and they don't spend, we haven't got the money to carry on comfortably in the cash flow, and it's a scary place to be. And that's a real test at that point when the money's low. What do you do? And profit might have to drive the bus for a bit, but we discover through that process that there are certain things we will never compromise on. So we will never compromise on staff wages. We always pay them the real living wage. We won't let staff go, which is the normal retail response if times are tough. We won't just fire people when trade is slow at different times. But what we are prepared to do is extend retailer terms, and I really hate doing that. But there's a really good, there's a benchmark in the industry that it can take up to 90 days for the big supermarkets to pay suppliers. So we aim for 45. And with a lot of our suppliers, we have 30 in place. And yet, you know, in January and February this year, we started breaking some of those agreements in order to keep going. So you've got several choices. You can either let staff go, pay them less, start putting prices up, and all this becomes a balancing act. And it's at those times, I think, that you really see the tensions between profit and purpose, and you have to make some choices. And yeah, I think that's an example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Ruth. Atif?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I mean, to be a fair trade product, I mean, not everyone, unless you would necessarily know, but you have to do certain things very, very differently. It's not just about having an audit that says you're paying well or you're paying above a market price. You also have to pay, regardless of your situation, regardless of what's happening here, you have to pay families and farmers, because they're essentially families, in advance. You pay them before they pick. You know, it's a bit of a challenge, right? So when you're seeing, you know, say the austerity measures and all the things that are impact where people are pinching their pockets, you are facing all of those social realities. But what is, you know, chiming through, especially what we're saying, is this about authenticity? It's about whether that authenticity resonates enough for people to reach further in their pockets, or to even have a conversation. Maybe they can't buy something, but they can talk about something, and they can make that something part of their own identity. It's a real challenge, but if we think about some of the difficulties that we've had, we've also seen Cafe Direct as an organisation that's really done well despite some of the realities. We've seen a culture where people really don't like buying battery hens, right? Battery eggs. Regardless of what we're facing, we just know it's bad. We don't like it, right? And most people are in that connection. Most people want to do good. They want to connect. It's just the role is how easy we can make that. And that making that profitable, yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. They have a space. It's just making sure that space can be a lot easier than it often is.
Really clear. Fox, did you want to add anything to that?
It's hard to add, but there's two things I'd say. One is be transparent with your team. When these problems come, when there are penny pinching times, actually sharing the problem often means everyone wants to get on board if they do believe in those values and the vision. Trying to kind of just deal with it yourself will end up just causing it to be a much bigger nightmare for you and probably create a much worse story than if you just said something in the first place. And pretty much to echo what you said, think of profit as fuel. So don't keep running just close to empty all the time. Start really focusing on taking your profit off first. There's nothing wrong with having that profit because it allows you to then go and do more good, whether that's reinvesting or just having the backup so that when those hard times come, you've got something to lean on. And everyone's going to thank you for that. They're not going to go, oh, you took your profit. That's the whole point. We're meant to be there. A community interest company is a great balance between sort of a charity and a limited company. The drivers are far more balanced. It's not all about profit and it's not all about doing good. And I think even if you're not going to become a CIC, it's worth looking at that business model as a whole and just seeing if there's any sort of lessons you can take about how you might divvy that up on your own account within your business. And that might make sort of profit a bit less of a kind of dirty word and something that you can lean into more. Sometimes it's just about you can't get enough work. And then you start kind of taking whatever you can get, and that's when your values will really be held up. But really, if you've got the right team, you would turn away the stuff that doesn't account because it's just going to distract you from putting your time into getting what you should have. So that's all I would probably add.
Yeah, thank you all. Yeah, again, it's really interesting with even such different businesses that you're all quite aligned with some of these things. And yeah, thank you for sharing specific examples. I know it's sometimes hard to put that theory into context. So can we lean on to the next question? For us at the Good Business Club, we kind of believe that everyone should be trying to do something good in their business and somehow positively impacting either their communities or the environment, whatever that looks like. From your own experience and in your own opinion, do you think that changes as you grow as a business? Do you think different size organisations have more responsibility or little responsibility? I'd love to get your thoughts around that. Atif, should we start with you?
Thanks. I don't know if I'm an example of a really big business yet, but I would say that, I mean, values do values change? I mean, I think that's probably a question for everyone in the audience to think of themselves as well. I think your values are your values. They are your values. That they are static, you know, and they can be toned. They can be adjusted because you're learning to develop them and you're informing your process, you're informing your participation, and hopefully you're widening it. But I think they're generally quite static. Does the organisation change its values because it's got bigger? I hope not. I've not seen that in the organisations that I've been part of, for sure. If anything, it's probably honed in those values a bit more to make sure that they're a little bit less woolly, and sometimes they've had to have that adjustment. But they are constant in the sense of who are we trying to connect to? Not empower, I really struggle with that word, but who are we trying to connect to? Be they lived experiences of marginalised learners in the UK, or they're people going through militarised occupation, but what is it that they're facing that says they can inform our work, they can inform our reality? And by that, I don't think it really changes unless we suddenly decide we're not going to be working on trade justice anymore, or we're not going to champion lived experiences anymore. And I can't see how that would change in our case, no matter how big we got. Yeah.
That's really clear, thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one? Go on, Fox.
I think part of it is people get blurred lines of what are their values, what are their mission, what's their vision. So actually one of the first things is just to get clear on what the hell your values are. And sometimes the word you've used to try and articulate what you think your value isn't necessarily right. So I think in that respect it can change. We're just going through this with the Joyful Web as, you know, we've been doing what we do for 10 years or more, but you sit down and have a conversation and they group the things and you go, oh, actually this word better represents this. I think what you're saying, it's still got the same divining rod, it's going in the same direction, but your kind of value word changes. And what that does is it kind of changes how you then communicate, how you push what it is that you do to the people you're hiring, to the people you're serving. And I think it can change for good, that you can get stronger with your message. But don't let it blur, because even when we have conversations, you can still kind of go, oh, well, that's a bit more of a vision or a bit more of an ambition. And actually the value is something that's kind of more concrete. And so spending the time, and then in theory, they don't change in terms of their intent, but they do change in terms of maybe what they let you represent. I found it to be really useful to know what those are. And there was one thing that was given to me as a piece of advice a while ago, which is don't imagine where you're trying to be at the end of the line. It's not what's on your gravestone. It's today I get up so that. And that's the same with your values and your vision. It's okay if it adjusts. You don't have to be really clear on the end result, because it can be paralysing in itself, because you can't commit to it, because you're like, oh, what if it's not the right thing? So it's just the right thing for today, and it might change tomorrow, and that's okay. So I don't think you can say it's concrete, and actually giving yourself that freedom to say it isn't can actually be valuable in itself, so you can think a little bit further past it. So
I also want to, thank you, Alice. Also to think about, should we be putting more pressure on larger organisations? Is that something that's important, or is it okay? Like I said, in Brighton, we've got people who are on their own, or a tiny business kind of starting up and trying to take over and take on these big problems we've got. Is there something we should be doing to pressuring more large organisations? Is that even authentic? We've talked about that as well. I'd love to hear some thoughts around that as well.
I feel like larger companies could pay their taxes for a start. I think that would be good as far as responsibility goes. I feel like every time I log into Facebook, I'm like, this business paid no tax this year, and I'm like, oh, it just makes me so angry. Anyway, I think when I saw this question, you sort of look at responsibility to do good, and in the context of business, I think a lot of people immediately go to finance, and they think about, okay, what can I do about giving, a share of my profits, or making a charity donation, or giving money, and for kind of small startup businesses, that might not be realistic. And I think we've been running the business for 2 years, and we're only just reaching a point now where we're profitable enough to start thinking about, okay, how could we potentially put a model in place where we do donate a part of our profit every year, or support other businesses financially. But what we have done an awful lot in our first 2 years is support people with our time. So we've given away our time in terms of having meetings with social enterprises to share our expertise, looking at skill swaps, looking at discounts, so that we can work with companies who wouldn't ordinarily be able to work with us. We work really closely with the Chamber of Commerce. We deliver training sessions. We give our time to speak at events. And I think that shouldn't be diminished when you're a company and you're first starting. Like that responsibility to do good doesn't necessarily have to be financial. And sometimes your time and your attention can be just as valuable.
Thank you.
And just to support Alice's point around, I think there's an argument to be said that the larger you are as a business, your ability to do good increases with that, with excess resource and everything else. And certainly from what we're seeing within the non-profit sector, more and more large businesses are moving away from that simple financial transaction of there's some money, great, off you go, and much more towards staff give back schemes. And it is very much time is more valued than money. And the second point is we shouldn't lose sight of the power of government policy, and it's not a particularly sexy subject, but some businesses will only do good when they're forced to do good. Now Charity Group has recently been inducted into an organisation called Reeves, which is the Reuse and Recycling European Union Network for Social Enterprises, and this group lobbies the EU around environmental policy and shaping it for good. And so from the ground up, we can challenge large businesses and we can kind of chip away, but ultimately government policy can drive a lot of change as well, and we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Ruth.
Thank you. So when I think about large businesses, of course, I go to the supermarkets because that's my field. So it's very, very important for us to be copied by the big guns, or transformation is not going to happen in the food industry. So I see it as very much as our responsibility to showcase what we do, amplify what we do, and sort of de-risk, because the big companies, the big supermarkets are very risk averse and we're not. Ironic considering they're the ones with all the money. But it's up to us to be influencing the big guys, and we do that. You know, we meet with M&S, we had a big meeting with Carrefour, and it's all about showing the way forward to them so that they can be inspired and adopt some of the things that are working really well in our shop and do it on a much bigger scale. Because if Tesco copied us tomorrow, we could go home and do something else, be done. Food industry would be transformed. So I think the best way of influencing big organisations is to show them there is a market, there is a consumer demand, there is a need that they can profit from if they get it right.
Yeah, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, but to look at the big companies, you've got to have a lot of faith in trickle-down economies, and I'm not so convinced. I suspect most of you aren't either. The largest employers of this country who make a real difference are small, medium enterprises, right? You guys make up, this room makes up small, medium enterprises. Small, medium enterprises are the people who pay taxes. They're the very people who create wealth and employment. It makes up actually 92% of the economy. So we can really worry about what big companies do and what they don't do. But I think, you know, and Ruth's a really good example. HISBE is a good example. They can play catch up too, and we can force them to, you know, and we should. We should be excited by that, rather than hoping they adopt things and we pretend that we're excited by that, and we shouldn't be. If I think about Zaytoun as well, we were very successful because, in a way, we weren't supermarket ready. But what we were ready was for people to be able to say, I want to buy this product in your shop. They would go to shops like HISBE. They would go to Fair Trade. They would go to small, you know, and it's in every Oxfam in the country. It's in Taj and all that. But it's also supporting 6,000 families, you know, 26 villages. But it wouldn't be able to do that if we said our biggest thing is whether the supermarkets give us a yes or a no, right? Because that just was never going to be, there was never going to be that yes. Yeah. So sometimes it is, and now I guess, you know, people want to chase that. If you look at the role modelling around the disability employment gap, it is lived experiences of small, medium enterprises that are looking to, because they lived that. And then you've got corporates trying to showcase what they're doing because of corporate compliance, not because they really want that diversity at fault, you know? And so we should be excited when they do it, but shame them for doing it if they're not doing it for the right reasons. Yeah.
Thank you. Go on, Fox.
So I really want to highlight that common thread about being forced. So like when they have to, or because they see other things. And I think I'd like to highlight there's definitely a sort of shift in that. You look at from Unilever right down to Primark, they're being forced to have to think about where they're sourcing their stuff. And it comes a point where hopefully we won't be able to make a choice about whether we're buying well or supporting the right companies. Just everyone's in that, but we're a long way off. To answer this question about the bigger organizations, especially if there's anyone here from one, even if they've got a collective that wants to make some change, typically they're restricted by, say, board decisions or maybe a global setup. So it's not just the local sort of outpost. So what I've seen happen in quite a lot of companies, and some of the ones I've worked with, is they tend to do a spin-off project. And as a public example, you could look at something like Metal from NatWest, where there's so much red tape. The idea of relaunching a different kind of banking solution within the company is just unheard of. So if you can go outside and kind of do something alongside, it does two things. One, it gives you the room to try it. Two, it gives you the evidence to prove it. So we're seeing all these companies that are doing really successfully when they're purpose-driven and driven by the right things, and the big corps saying, oh, we can't be that, we don't want to risk things. So it removes all the risk. They can go and give it a go, prove it, and then it starts to be something that the shareholders want to have. And even if their motivations are now about money again, at least it's pulling them in the right direction. And hopefully as part of that, you start to then shift the makeup of the company, and ultimately we just get to better business for everyone. And I think that's kind of the thing. They need some space to be able to do that. And I do see, especially as younger generations who are kind of more minded this way are coming into these big corps and working their way up, well, they're the ones going, look, is there anything we can do to try and make it happen? So I'd really focus on what are the side projects that big companies can do to demonstrate that they can do it, then look at doing the bigger shift, rather than just looking at competitors or other businesses. So
thank you all, and thank you also for engaging in the debate that I was trying to create there as well. So one thing also we see in the space that we're working in is that a lot of people and organisations who are echoing each other, and there's different terminology. We've talked about language at the very start here. So there's social enterprises, there's co-ops, there's B Corps, there's CSR, there's the fair trade certification, social enterprise certification. A lot going on. From your own experience, do you think all of this is helping us define what business for good looks like better, or do you think it's hindering the work that we're trying to do, or just trying to run the businesses? Ruth, I might start with you for that one.
Okay. Yes. So when there are complex issues, everyone may be working on different solutions, and I'm a big fan of that. I think that getting territorial is very hard work. Being someone that says this is the right way to do it and this is the only way and you have to be constituted as a social enterprise or you have to do it this way. I think that's just such a waste of effort to try and be the correct one, to try and be the only one, and to be territorial is kind of a wasted effort. So I'm a big believer in a rising tide raising all the boats and everyone creating their own solutions to complex issues. I think it's useful if there's a shared vision, a united vision. And beyond that, I would say all power to you. Let's not argue over the right way to do things.
Really clear, thank you. Who else would like to weigh in on that one?
I can add, yeah.
Go on, Fox.
I don't want to take too much of the floor, basically. From our side, we always say that it's not B2B or B2C, it's human to human. And when you understand that there's people on each side of whatever it is, even if there's some AI in the middle, there's still people being impacted. And so we're all just a group of people in very disparate job roles, job companies, and there isn't really a way to describe us. And sometimes it's entrepreneur or it's change maker. And I think we talked about this the other day, which is it just needs to be a good enough flag for people to kind of collect in the right place and share the intent. And I think business for good is probably the closest we've all got to going, yeah, I get the intent of it, and it's okay if I'm a social enterprise or I'm a freelancer or I'm just a charity or an eco-war, it doesn't matter. And I think that is the biggest shift that's kind of given me a little bit of faith that it's going to happen. And I think maybe a word will come up for it in the future, and we don't need to rush it. All we need to do is make sure we're all hitting the same intent. And I think that's the same with the visions and values. And I see things like open banking and stuff where there's this kind of shared open standard about what we're trying to achieve and where we're trying to go. And I'd love to see that kind of thing happen. And I think, the Good Business Club and Business for Good is kind of the start of saying, right, what's this kind of foundation, this framework? And I think we're at the very early stages of that. But the fact that we filled a room with people like you who've gone, I want an ear on this, and there might be one little sentence which I get to take away and I can use that as fuel for something else, that's already good enough than no one turning up in a room. So yeah, I agree, don't argue about what you are or tell other people how they should do it, just all agree that you're going in the right direction and go for it, and we'll find out where we end up.
There is a lot to be said for connectivity, and I think that and perhaps it's a class discussion. I'm sometimes baffled as a in the world that I get to work in, but I also think, am I reaching out to a younger version of myself? Am I reaching out to a class struggle that I wouldn't have necessarily connected to, that we're in now? Would I have connected to the arena or the connections I make now? So do these labels, do they have transparency? Do they have legitimacy? These are really big questions. But what we are in an age where we can ask those questions and we can answer them quicker than we've ever been able to. We're also in an age where we can replace our wisdom with cynicism, quicker than we've ever been able to. And we're watching generations do that really, really well, and being very sophisticated as they do it. So it's a powerful moment to say, right, I'm going to make that cynicism mean something. I'm going to make that label prove itself. I'm going to give it a good kick in, because it could be just corporate social governance, it could be just marketing, or it could be real. And that's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for organisations to be able to prove their worth, be they middle-class centric products that are kind of nice and woolly, or I'm building schools in the global south, or they're actually saying, no, we are really deeply connected to the values of who made this product and why you are eating it or buying it. So it's an exciting time. So I think it's a time to embrace it really, but it is almost a time to sort of almost, if I use fair trade, because I think that's fairly a giveaway, fair trade 2.0, do you know, and what that means. And I would say that for B Corp and for others as well.
Really clear, thank you.
I think also just to add, and I think it is really easy living in the city we live in, networking in the circles we work in, having these sorts of conversations, to kind of take for granted that, or lose sight of the fact that even the fact we're here having this conversation is radical. Like, there are people that are running businesses that have not even started to think about this stuff, which could be hugely changing. And I think that one of the biggest challenges is getting this conversation out there and taking it wider, so that we're not always talking to the people that get our values and understand. And I think that's a massive challenge around kind of all of us who collectively want to do business for good, is not only defining it, but bringing people into that conversation where this isn't even on their radar yet.
Thank you.
So I think we need to be careful that we don't overcomplicate business for good. You know, at the core of business for good, it's just simply doing the right thing by our fellow man and women. And if you're going to take a message to the people en masse, you have to simplify that. And the more labels that we provide and the more categories that we seem to be creating at the moment, it seems to me that we're just overcomplicating and almost restricting something which is actually quite a simple concept and we've been doing for generations, but perhaps because of the way of the world, we've lost sight of that slightly. But that's kind of my take on it, is that let's just keep it simple, keep it about core social values, and not turn it into something which is too corporate-y, because I think that goes completely against what Business for Good is, its principles.
Thank you, and thank you all again. Really, I'm glad that you shared all that. There might be people in the crowd also that's got different opinions, so I hope you guys will share with that with us as well. I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll go to the audience. So get your ideas and questions ready. To kind of just bring it to a close, can you describe what Business for Good means for you in around 10 words? 10 words seems very short, but a short amount of words. And Alice, I'm going to start with you for this one.
I was scared of this question, so I wrote down 10 words.
Amazing.
Is that okay?
Please.
It was the first thing that came out of my head, and my 10 words were putting out into the world what you want to see.
Beautiful. Thank you.
There we go.
Who'd like to have another go at it?
I don't know how many words I did, but I want to say something like, let's blow up outdated business models with new ones built to serve people and community. I think I put that in on my LinkedIn profile, and that's what I mean. You know, it's the whole idea of blowing apart the existing ones with new models.
Thank you.
So literally as part of our rebrand, we're trying to boil it down into actually our name. So we're now called Humanative, and it's all about just be humanative, which is essentially the intent of just do good in any way that you can. And I just want to add quickly a practical thing, which is we try to make good things happen when bad or good things happen. So if we have a bad weather day or we lose power, we try to donate to someone who needed power or rain and solve those problems. And some of these things can be pennies. So just trying to really connect doing good. It's, like you said, it doesn't have to be massive financial, it doesn't have to be time. So just being humanative is kind of what drives us. So that's Business for Good.
Really clear, thank you. Go on, Atif.
10 words. I don't know 10 words. I mean, it is, again, it goes back to values. It's just having really an authentic need to connect to the reality that people live under. Do you know? That's good. Yeah. 6, that's what I've
Thanks,
got,
Emma.
Yeah. I mean, it is going to boil down to that. It's whether you make it your business to authentically connect to what's good, you know?
Yeah, thank you. Michael, bring us to a close.
At the end of your day, has your efforts had meaning? I think that's just under 10.
Amazing.
Just squeezed it in. Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Over to you guys now. I'm going to pass over a mic to anyone who wants to ask a question, and then if you've got one specifically for one of the speakers, do ask. Maybe I'll put, actually got your names up. Who will be the brave one to start us off? Thank you, Ian. I'm coming on up that way. I'll meet you halfway.
Hi. So I kind of wanted to return a bit to that kind of alignment. So I went to Hastings recently, and they've got this amazing thing happening in Hastings called Hastings Commons, and they're like buying £2 million buildings and like empty buildings and repurposing them. But the thing that was really impressive about them was they had this sense of alignment. So they got their tenants of their buildings to kind of align with their own values, and they actually like sign a bit of an agreement to say, we agree that we're going to be like good people and work together. So is there a way, do you think, in Brighton or Brighton and Hove to move towards that kind of alignment, that we're not just in our little bubble, our little good bubble, and that we can somehow find a way for the city to talk about aligning and having like values that you kind of sign up to and say, it's my responsibility, it's our responsibility to deal with inequality or homelessness, etc., and do it as a sort of wider thing rather than being in danger of thinking everything's going really well and you realise we're like still a small percentage of our city and what goes on.
Who would like to start that one off? The big city-wide question, yeah.
So I guess the first thing is a little bit of faith to share that it is starting to happen. What we're finding is we're having to go up before we can come down. So there's social innovation centres, social enterprise centres, the universities are doing a lot more. So at the education layer, which is really where we need it ultimately, that's already flying, and that's not just Brighton. So that kind of restores your faith that something is moving. The next thing is to really get the ears of the people who can drive that change. But they're in exactly one of the questions earlier, their balance between purpose and profit. Because especially when it's the councils, they've got so much budget that they have available to spend. What do they spend it on? I really like your phrasing of it though, which is how do we just get aligned? How do we all just agree that this is our kind of our city mission, which maybe then can become a kind of country mission? I'm actually going to start thinking about that because, you know, we've all got platforms where we either share our thinking or advice, whether that's LinkedIn, podcasts, local TV stations, radio stations. We can just start putting that message out there, and I think that's a really unique way to kind of start phrasing it, is just, can we get a direction? Like, it's not, we've got to have some massive 10-step blueprint that everyone's got to go and implement. Just, do we all generally agree this is a good idea? And maybe the Green Party is kind of part of that, but it's so politically led, and this should be completely agnostic to all of those things. It's just, again, it's the intent. So I'm going to really take that. That's been useful for me because it's something that I believe in at an education level has to happen, but I hadn't really thought about starting to take that now right up to the top. So I think it's a work in progress, but there's definitely progress. I hope that gives something. So.
I think if every business in the city made a commitment to having a positive, a tangible, if every business in the city made a specific commitment to doing something for the community, it would transform the city. And I think it needs to be that loose. I think that it starts with this awareness that business can make money and have impact. And look, there are lots of businesses in the city doing that, and it's attractive to shoppers and consumers, and that there can be forums to get every business to look at what they do. And it may be as simple as you've got an accountancy firm and they decide to pledge 50 hours a year to a startup social enterprise. So it really might be that simple. But imagine if every business in the city did something like that, it could be transformative.
So Hastings is a really interesting example because it has the highest youth deprivation figures in the southeast. On the government statistics for poverty, it's in the bottom 10%. And having a close attachment with Hastings in previous jobs, I almost feel that there is a movement within the town at the moment that it's hit rock bottom, for want of a better word, and the best time to create change is when change is desperately needed. And I think Hastings is going through a really exciting period at the moment, and there's almost a regeneration taking place within the town. My thoughts around regeneration projects is that they only seem to occur with towns that are in that bottom 10%. It seems to be your towns and your areas that aren't your wealthiest, but just sitting in amongst that middle bit are on a gradual decline that are my biggest worry for, because they're not on the government's radar or in anyone's particular radar. I think that the challenge for a city like Brighton is it's so diverse from a wealth perspective, so it is perceived to be a particularly affluent part of the southeast, but at the same time you've got particular areas and we know where there is serious poverty. And certainly in our line of work, where Sussex does struggle, is that general perception that it's a wealthy county, and so your smaller pockets of deprivation get further and further left behind. But I think Hastings is a great example, and they're doing some tremendous work down there.
Excellent. Anyone else got another question? Come on, brave people. Come on, Graham.
Hi, Graham Priestley. I spent 10 years in legal and general trying to influence board behaviour, so I know what that feels like and those conversations. And now I work with start-up businesses to grow them. And just to comment on the profit thing, I was really fortunate to be part of the mission-led business review for UK government at L&G. And one of the things we talked about is use the term margin for mission. Let's forget what your structure is. And the reason why... Yep, sorry. Of course. Sorry, there we go. That's better. Use the term margin for mission, okay? And what that means is any organisation in this world has to make more money than they spend in a year, okay? And how that money is then used is for the mission. If you're clear on your mission, then it's okay to make a surplus to spend on your mission the following year, whether you're a charity or whether you are a PLC or whoever, and people judge you on your mission. And then the other thing we recommended in that review, which I think charities have got really, really down to a T, is trustees of charities every year have to say, this is how our organisation has a social benefit statement. And one of our recommendations to government was, whatever organisation you are, KIC, PLC, put a social benefit statement into the Companies Act so that people can say, actually, this is our version of events, and people can judge you on it. So the margin for mission is just a simple way of getting rid of the debate about profit. And I think there's some good examples from you guys tonight. So.
Thank you for sharing that. Is there anyone else who wants to share something to contribute to the conversation as well? That's partially why you're here as well. If it's not a question, but something that you wanted to add to it, something you want to highlight, or also another question. Last chance, guys. Very good, Emma. Thank you.
Something I've said before, harping on. The question that was up about as organisations get bigger and their responsibility to do good. I think as organisations increase, they have more responsibility to their own team, and the good can be inside and outward. And the diversity of thought that Atif was talking about, which can be a real strength and asset to the team, to making sure there's welcoming and inclusive, so all of the community can thrive and everyone can be at the table. And we're talking about the bus, everyone can have a turn. I'm going to bring that bus analogy in a different way. Everyone can have a bit of a turn driving the bus for a bit, or at least being on the bus. It might be quite nice for, so I think it's that responsibility to really build a culture of welcome and inclusion within your organisations. And I think large organisations, and I'm talking really large organisations, have an absolute responsibility to do that.
Thank you.
I've got a passion every time to try and give things that can be sort of taken away and thought about and used, because this needs to become usable, not just discussed. And I like what you've just said. And I just thought I'd give an example of someone we worked with, where through what we did, we were able to give them enough free time within their business that they could allow their employees to spend more time with their family and to do more volunteering at the organisations they believe in. So if companies could just find ways to make more time available, that in itself can have a massive impact. And it doesn't mean you need to impact your profit. We're talking about, 4-day work weeks and things, which quite a big change, and not every company can do it. But everyone can find half an hour here and there. And if you added those up over a year and you can give someone an extra day, that can make a big difference. So these tiny little percentages can make such a big difference, not just to what they're able to do, but the mindset they have about what you think they should be allowed to do. And so, yeah, you have people who need to be on the front desk all the time, but between you can work a way to work out a rota. So it doesn't always need to be massive sweeping changes. And I love that it's about focusing on how you can deal with your team. And we're all about that. When we say we start with who, it's because if you know who you're helping, you know why they need help and how you can help. So we always go to that level, and that includes our team and the customers we've got, their teams. Quite often when customers come to us, they're talking about how they can serve their customers better, and we go, well, how's your team? And actually, when you start looking at it with both sides of the fence, because if your team's really happy, they're going to serve your customers better, and they'll be really happy. And I absolutely, and I always use the word serve, not sell. We're all here to serve. And if you work out what someone really needs, not just what you can sell them, that's the biggest difference you can make to someone's life, because they don't always need your product. Sometimes they need a word of advice or time or another direction, and you'll be a better person for that, and that's how you can be humanitive. So, absolutely. Yeah, and we, especially if it's face to face, because we've got mirror neurons. That stuff kicks in, and you've got no control over it. That's why someone smiling and comes in is going to react very differently to someone who isn't. And so, being self-aware of that is quite a hard thing for a lot of people to do. But giving people time to kind of naturally just end up doing it means you can kind of light these fires without having to kind of go through crazy psychological training and all the rest of it. So I just wanted to sort of reflect that back in case it was useful. So,
Atif.
Yeah, I mean, just a small point is, I always like using the phrase, I guess it's part of our work, but anticipatory welcomes. Who do we mean by that, and who is it we're working to include? We're talking about some wonderful values today, as a panel, as a room, but I can see what I see in the room. I can see some really well-meaning folks, but I can see a lot of folks that should be here that aren't here. I can see a lot of folks that would have a really meaningful engagement as to what they need as in their startups, or just their ideas, or the legitimacy of the way they think. All these things could be in this room, but they're not here. This room isn't. I wouldn't say this room is particularly radical, but it's lovely, and I spend a lot of time with lovely people. I want it to be more radical. I think that and we deserve it to be more radical, because it informs our process. It tells us where the good is as well, because we can spend a lot of time being good to each other and talking about how good we are, but it's easy, folks. It generally is. Out there, it's a bit tougher, and we've got to think about that. So if we're going to talk about in Hastings, we're going to be talking about in Brighton. What does a vision for Brighton look like that has an anticipatory welcome for people who don't necessarily get to be in that room? Yeah, and how do they inform that process?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think one thing I just also add, something that Emma, you said, which you touched upon a little bit in the conversation, is that sometimes doing good is about looking internally at the way that you're just running your business, and it could be everything from just your supply chain. So, every business needs stationery or catering. There's always another business out there that's doing some really good stuff that you can start looking at working with to also be doing the good stuff. So we touched upon it not just being about giving money and also time we've touched about, but maybe it's something internally, the way you're looking after your staff, how you're employing people, how you're looking after the people that you're employing as well. There's so much that you can look at to actually be doing some good stuff as well. Excellent. Have we got another question? Amazing. Yes, go on. Last one.
Thank you. It's related to what you were just saying. I'm doing research into meaningful work and workplaces, and we know that one aspect of how we experience meaning is obviously being of service to others, which is at the heart of what you're all doing. And so the question that we're working with at the moment is, how do organisations who are transforming the world through positive and good business, social environmental impact, how do they do they also create meaningful workplaces? And so my question to you is, aside from the part of the purpose and contribution, how else do you, for yourself and for the others in your organisations, feel that you create meaningful work? What are the other aspects that you work with?
So this is super, super close and important to us, because I don't want it to just ever feel like it's something you say but you don't believe. I think that's super important. And so meaningful is not just some words above a door that you go, oh yeah, we're the words above a door. It's something that drives you. And so our big shift for us, we were a traditional development agency, just doing code for anyone who needed code. And the shift came for us when we went, we don't just write good code, we code for good. And so to answer your question about how we kind of then implemented that, the trick for us was to start talking more to our customers and our customers' customers, and making sure that the whole team know what the real impact is. So not going, oh, what was the profit increase or whatever, it's what difference did it make? So that story I just told you about the time that was freed up, that means we know we enabled that. And then we've added another thing. There's a company called B1G1, which stands for Buy One, Give One. They're quite closely aligned with the global goals. And the whole point is they've got this marketplace of amazing causes that you can give to. And some of them are a penny and some of them are quite expensive. But it means that everything we do, we can have a real positive change. So when we have a meeting with someone, we donate for speech therapy sessions for a disabled child because we had the pleasure of communicating, so does someone else. So suddenly all the actions you're taking in the business are tied to something good, and so you know that getting up and even doing the kind of mundane stuff can actually have a really good effect on someone's life. So it doesn't necessarily mean that just the work you do or the product you sell has to be the only way that you can have effect. And we also found that making it more like the connection thing again. So not just going, we've donated to charity X, but did that go on postcards or advertising, whatever, donating to a specific thing, and ideally something that's important to them, that resonates a lot more, and then you realize that we're getting up to make those things happen. So I think there's options there to say, even if our product itself can't necessarily be said to be having a positive change, the things we do around and what we affect after that, we have to communicate it with the whole team. And it's that bit that's super important, because if you don't, it's just the people at top going, oh look, our company's got a really good, like the statement of what good we've done, and maybe you can read it in the thing, but they don't feel connected to it. They're just getting up still to come and write letters, make coffee, whatever it is. So I think it's getting past the what you're doing and really getting to the why you're doing it, and that takes some time. And actually, the best thing is ask your team. Say, why do you do what you do? And if they go, I don't know, go, well, let's get someone in to help you find out what it is. Because sometimes you've hired someone into a position and they're not really doing what they love, and they're just kind of looking at this thing that's happening over here. And if you just redirected them into the thing you should be doing, or they should be doing, and really focus on making them the best version of themselves, they will be driven to get up every day because they're going in to do what they love. And it doesn't mean have a great day every day. I'm not suggesting it's, pretty colours everywhere, but most of your days will be great. And I'll finish with our whole driving thing for our whole company is never hate a Monday. And that basically means never hate any day. And if there's too many days where even for myself there's that sense of dread and you kind of don't want to go in or you don't want to get up, we need to have a chat and work out what it is. Because if you don't want to come in, you're not going to want to do what we need to do, and we can't help people do what they absolutely should be doing, which really impacts people. So that little litmus test is kind of the best thing we use for everything, and you can hold everything up to that. And is that going to make me hate Monday? Then we probably need to think about whether we want to do that. And that I think has been our best guide in life for making sure that the team is happy and healthy and connected to doing what they want to do, not just what they could do. So
we're not very good at this in my business. So we have a team of 13 people that run the store, and they generally come to the store to work with us because of the values and the meaning that we imbue in it. So we're out to transform the food industry. But at the end of the day, it's also a shop job, and it can be quite repetitive, and you take a lot of crap from customers. People can be difficult, really difficult. So it can be wearing as well. So you've just made me really think that I need to explore what the meaning is for my team in the shop 6 months in, when maybe the idea of transforming the food system is superseded by the daily experience of being in the shop. So thank you for that. You've got the old cogs going.
Yeah, I think it was a great question. It's not really, it's not a destination, is it? It is going to be a journey. It's constantly at work. It's constantly being asked itself. It's constantly reflecting, is this good enough? How are the team? When I get fortunate enough to be at the head of something that is asking, and I have to ask this question of myself: how is this landing? And sometimes it can be really difficult. We recently won a big award. We were nominated for the Inclusive Companies Award, and we won a really great award with Unlimited, who are here, on the disability employment gap, and championing that. And I think we've got an 86% I should say this is for diversity and ability DNA. So we have an 86% disclosure rate on disabilities and difference. So that's great. It's great we have it. But we won this award, and I think I'm not going to say no. But we couldn't do the work without that lived experience, though. We couldn't do it well without that diversity of thought informing in the team, because we're reaching out to the most vulnerable place on earth. We're reaching out to people's homes. We're reaching out to places where people who are going through lived experiences of marginalisation and disabilities don't get to be judged. Right? It's a really powerful place. So we have to get it right internally of what business have we got really talking to any company to change them if we don't do it internally. But that does not mean that we have the monopoly on it. And I guess that's my only answer, is to say we love what we do. You have to be passionate about it. You've got to look for that difference. Diversity is about counting people, but inclusion is about making them count and really showing that. But like I said, and I like talking about it, you can tell. but at the same time, I won't know that I've got it right. My team will be able to show me that. It won't be me that can say that.
I think a big thing for me, and when I was employed in other companies, one of my biggest frustrations is feeling like I didn't really have any power or say in how my role developed. It was like there was a set career path, or there was a set way of doing things, and it was you grow into that next step, you do the role that is expected of you, and that's the kind of set career progression through the company. And that combined very much with the feeling of working for people that were dictating how things go. And I have never wanted to, I never wanted to run a company like that. And we've only recently taken on our first employee, and the conversation around that was, we don't know how your role's going to go. We don't know how your career progression's going to go. We want you to be communicating with us and talking to us at every stage and weighing in every month. Tell us what's working for you. Tell us what's not working for you. Tell us what would make a difference to you, and shape that for yourself. And I think that communication and that honesty and that openness and that transparency is something we want to cultivate. We never want anyone that works with our company to feel like they're working for us. We want them to feel like they're working with us, and that we're all part of the team, and that all of our opinions are listened to and valid and weighted in the same way and given the same consideration. So for me, that was kind of born out of my own experience, but that really is how we communicate with our team, and how we want our team to be involved in the direction and the growth of the business, in order to give their roles the meaning that they want them to have, to enjoy coming to work and never have that feeling of dread that I used to wake up with.
So for us, it's very much about each individual stakeholder understanding the clear mission of what we're trying to achieve, and the value and feeling appreciated as part of that mission, no matter what they do within the organisation. And I always refer back to a very famous interview with a cleaner at NASA when they were posed, "What do you do?" And they said, well, we're contributing towards putting a man on the moon. So it doesn't matter what they do, whether they're a driver, a cleaner, it's not about hierarchy. Particularly with our organisation, we try to be as inclusive and as democratic as possible, but everybody understands that every minute they put in during the day contributes to the wider mission and the bigger cause. And I think if you can get that within your organisation, you don't even need to be in the room. Someone who I hugely respect in a previous job role I had said that culture is very much how your business operates when you're not there. And that's something that I've taken with me into this business, and I have every faith that when I'm not in the office, that everything, people understand the mission and those efforts are still taking place.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, go on, Fox.
So just because of the whole thing with meaning and being around the meaning conference and stuff going on as well, people typically do not find meaning in things, they find meaning in people. So just connect it to the people that are affected. Even if you're building things, get to the people. That would be the first thing. And the second thing is, and this is kind of my real core mission, is people want to be heard. So learn to listen better. Because a lot of this stuff that you're coming out and you're listening to us, you might have a lot of people around you who are maybe already signalling or saying these things, or want the opportunity to, especially the introverts. They're often the ones who are reflecting on more than you can imagine. So find better ways to hear people. And there's a really good book called Crucial Conversations, which kind of gives you a few nods here. It's like having a superpower, and it's not about gaming anyone. It's not about psycho cleverness. It's just understanding how to make the right safe space to listen to what's needed. That works for your customers, for your team, for your family. And I think, for me, if everyone would just listen better, we'd probably all get a lot further, a lot quicker. And so...
Amazing, thank you, folks. I think it's a great place to bring this panel to a close. Thank you for everyone for your questions. I want to say a real heartfelt thank you from me as well. It's absolutely amazing to be in front of people who are really inspiring for me, and I really hope that that inspiration is felt by the people here and the people we can share this message with as well. So I hope you'll all join me in having a massive thank you to our speakers tonight.